building. So her basic attack is very slow. They actually slowed it down from what I understand from the original Paragon game. It does physical damage, obviously, but it also does magical damage because of her passive. So magical damage is very relevant to Muriel's kit, especially now since this update. Okay. I can never pronounce this. Alacrity? I don't know. It's her right click ability. Her right click ability throws an orb out there into the world, and then when it first starts off, it doesn't do a significant amount of shielding. It's actually primary. It's funny too because she's built around a shield meta kit, right? And surprisingly enough, this is my opinion, and this is so far a very strong opinion, and it has much more reasoning than getting any other item first. Get your right click first. Muriel players, please get your right click first, because it is not supposed to be a shield at first. That's not its purpose. Its purpose is a poking device. Now, a lot of players would say get your Q first to help poke, or get your E first, so that way you can shield damage and all, so that way you can shield and damage. And it's basically a good way to make people, to go away. That's wrong. A Q ability is going to use 70 mana. That's a quarter of your mana, and it's going to not replenish fast enough because you're just starting off. And all it does damage and it slows. Now, obviously, it does more damage while they're slowed. It does 10% more damage while they're slowed, right? We're going to go into great detail about that ability in just a second. But it's 70 mana. The cooldown is 12 seconds. And you're only going to get 2.5 seconds worth of value on that. Okay? You're only going to get 2.5 seconds worth of value. And that's if your carry is actually smart enough to move in on that. Okay? Your E, it starts off with 100 mana. Okay? That's about 35% of your mana, 40% around there, depending on which item you get first. And the cooldown is 18 seconds. That's a huge mana drainer, and all it does is initially, it does 110, it does 60 damage. It literally better do no damage. It'd rather just do no damage at all. There's no point. But then, and obviously it stacks on the Sentinel. So realistically, it does damage, it gives you a 110 shield, which is 2 primary attacks from anybody. So if you're in a duo lane, which you would be because you're Muriel, 2 attacks would negate this. Boom. It negates 2 attacks. Oh, like that's it. Those 2 attacks, 2 primary attacks. It gives you a bubble, and it does damage, 60 damage, and it scales to magical damage, but it doesn't scale right away. Okay, so that's 2, and then 3, it amplifies your carry's basic attacks, right? Your Q doesn't do that, by the way. Your Q doesn't do that. So it does 3 things. But your right click has a shield. Granted, it's 60 shield. It's 50 shield. It's about half the shield that you'd get from the bubble. Okay. It grants you attack speed, which is 10% starting out. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. Because if you're like any other carry, 80% of the carries get attack speed items. So you're stacking on 20% attack speed right off the rip for your carry. And it gives you 20%. Now, decaying movement speed means that it starts off at 20% and decays very fast. It does decay very fast. But all that lasts for 4 seconds. That's 3 buffs it gives you. No, I'm sorry. 4 buffs because of Muriel's passive. That's 4 buffs for the price of 60 mana. And do you notice something? I noticed it right away. It doesn't scale. you're gonna spend 60 mana, which is less than 25% of your mana, every 12 seconds, rather than spending 70%, which is, some people might think that's not a lot. It adds up, bud. It adds up. Okay, and it doesn't do anything. Your shield, your E doesn't do as much, but your right click starting out, it does so much poke damage and negation, and just overall it gives you an advantage. It gives anybody an advantage if you use it right. And the fact that right now, if you right click, basically I call it the fusion orb, but basically you stand next to your partner and you orb somebody, you both get that buff. You both get a shield, speed boost, attack speed boost, and obviously Muriel's passive ability. But Muriel already has it, but you know what I mean. So it amplifies the grounds rather than concentrated ground. Sure, if you both stand in it, it gives it to you, but that's 100 mana every 18 seconds. It's more worth it to get a right click, to let your carry be a carry and you be a support. That's what it's all about. Muriel is that's why they say Muriel is no joke. They actually say Muriel support, because she is meant to literally stand in the back and give everything to your carry, and so that way your carry can do everything for your team. That's who she is. This right click is so important to her kit in early, mid, and late game. It defines who you are as a support character and can actually make or break depending on how you play it and who you play against in the duo lane. It's absolutely crucial to get this first. You get an advantage, you start out great, and maxing this out as soon as possible is so awesome, because then it scales on magical damage, and by that time you should have a stacked magical items, so you should be doing really well. And other people like mages should have actual items to increase magical power upon hit. So you are absolutely looking at a way to give your entire team a huge advantage in team fights from beginning, mid to end. No question. Serenity. This is the Q. Now this is actually your own poke or your own clear, depending on what lane you're actually in. I'm talking about support right now. So it scales on magical damage. When you press your Q, it does do a bit of damage, 80 to 220 it scales to. It hits any enemies. Now there is a bit of a glitch, and I don't know if this is an intentional, but once it can hit a group of enemies, but once it leaves that group, it disappears. So it doesn't go beyond that group. Even if it's supposed to go, like if there's nobody there and you shoot it, it will go farther. But because there's enemies in its path, it stops right short. So if the group stops short from the actual directory it can go, it will actually go shorter. I don't know if that's intentional. I don't know if that's a balance thing. I don't know, but that's nevertheless, you can get an entire team with the Q if you use it right. It's huge. It slows people down. They just buffed this too. It slows people down by 35%. 35%. A lot of people are saying like that's still not enough. That's still not good enough. That's still not a stun. I get it. Narbash is the only one that can test that argument, in my opinion. Narbash is the only one, and that's because of his stun duration that he has the capabilities of doing. That's all. His stun is huge. He can go, I think, he can go up to 4.5 or 4.3. I don't know if they nerfed it, but 4.3, I think, seconds on a stun. That's almost 5 seconds. That's huge. That's as long as my right click lasts. Almost. That's huge. While the targets are slowed for that 35% for 2.5 seconds, they take 10% increased damage from all sources, which means physical, magical, dot, everything. It means all sources. That's all. The sources it's really meaning is magical and damage, physical and damage. I mean, physical and magical. Jesus, physical and magical. It's very good. It scales really well. I think this is a perfect item. My E. This E, and a lot of people would disagree with me. The E is useless until late game. Absolutely useless until late game. It drains your mana. It's absolutely useless. It's an ultimate ability that doesn't do anything. Essentially, that's what it is. It's an ultimate ability that does nothing really until late game. Until late game. You see the difference. 110 shield to 350 plus 50% magical increased damage, or increased for magical power. It's huge. So it can go up to, I believe, 1,080 or 1,380. I can't remember exactly the number. Somewhere in between there. If you do all magical items with all the perma magical, like if you do every magical item at max magical power, like the 70, the 90s, and the 80s ones, you will be able to get up to that range. Wow. Huge. You have to increase it that much. But your right click scales from 170 to 20% magical damage, and you get it every 8 seconds, and it only costs 60 mana. This one is double that, and it doesn't do as much. It cut in half for the 4 seconds from right click, 2.5 for my E, and it does 10 seconds rather than my cooldown does 8 seconds. So it's so much better. You see that? It's so much better. And 40% magical damage from 140. I believe that's only up to 400 or some shit like that. So 400 damage when it explodes if they stay in there after the 1 second. It doesn't do enough. If my E debuffed, I would be happy with that. If it debuffed, I would be absolutely happy with that. Or if it took away the damage and instead stunned people, I would be okay with that too for the 2.5 seconds. I'd be okay with that too. Or for the 1 second, I'm sorry. If it's done for 1 second, I'll be okay with that too. But I think realistically, the debuff ability should be added to her E. And keep the same. I mean, I would even increase it. So I would cost it. It would cost 105. I'll just increase it by 5 on everything. 105, 110, 115, 120, 125. Boom. Keep the cooldown the same, keep everything the same, but it debuffs. I think that would be perfect. Absolutely huge, in my opinion. But whatever. It is a good ability late game. It's an ability that you'd use to negate things like Gideon's ultimate. I mean, obviously, I'm going to come into a direct counter to that in just a second. Gideon's ultimate, Grux's pull. Richter's pull. His ultimate kind of shuts you down with his silence a little bit. It's really good against Murdochs and Howsers. It's very good against that. It's even good against Kalaris and Shinibis. Countess, it's not too. It doesn't really make a difference for Countess. Really, it does boo her away a bit sometimes, depending on the character and depends on who's playing her. But your E is supposed to basically negate damage that people would be otherwise too far away or could not negate themselves. So in like open areas and stuff like that, that's when you would want to use this ability to basically make people go away and to help your teammates in open areas. It's a very good ability late game. Very, very good. Your ultimate, Reversal of Fortune. Now I don't know why they named it that, don't know, but it prepared for flight, allowing Muriel to target an allied hero anywhere in the world, granting them a shield before launching. They get that shield, soaring to their location. On arrival, once you get there, once you bop once you bop on top of the allied hero, nearby enemies take magical damage and are knocked up, stunned for 0.5 seconds. Now, in my opinion, they need to increase that to 1 second. And that's really it. That's really it. Jump it up to 1 second. Why not? Why not? It doesn't do very much right now besides relocation. That relocation ability is absolutely huge. That this is what I mean. Her ultimate is the only ultimate in the support